How much is it worth to you? What's your price?
To call off the revolution?
What's your price?
My life.
Hi everybody, I'm Dom Griffin, I'm a film critic, and you're watching the Armchair Auteur. It's an ongoing video series I do where we do movie reviews, video essays, script analysis, that sort of thing. If you're the kind of person who likes film culture, likes to see people pick it apart, please consider subscribing. Today we're going to be taking a break from spooky content to make good on a promise I made this summer by reviewing Aaron Sorkin's new film, The Trial of the Chicago 7. A few months ago, I made a video about the script for The Trial of the Chicago 7 that Aaron Sorkin had written back in 2007 when it was in development for director Steven Spielberg. It's kind of a long video. If you haven't seen it, you should definitely check it out. But I promised to review the finished film when it came out this year, at the end of the year now, because Aaron Sorkin ended up directing the movie himself, and it's basically one of Netflix's biggest sort of hopefuls for the Academy Award season, such as it exists in 2020. Now, that script review is kind of a long video, and it's very in-depth and very detailed about the script and about Aaron Sorkin's entire writing process. So for this video, we're going to be a lot more streamlined talking about the finished product itself in comparison to what my feelings were from the script. I did the same thing last year with The Joker, and it's going to work out okay, so I think we're going to do it again. So, The Trial of the Chicago 7 follows a real court case that happened in 1969 about 7, technically 8 individuals who were put on trial for inciting the riots outside of the Democratic National Convention in 1968 in Chicago. Of those 7 people, the movie primarily focuses on 5. And within that 5, there are 3 separate distinctions in terms of, alignment. So there's leaders of the Yippie movement, Abbie Hoffman and Jerry Rubin, played by Sascha Baron Cohen and Jeremy Strong of Succession fame. Then, across the way, there's also Tom Hayden and Rennie Davis, representatives of the SDS, played by Eddie Redmayne and Alex Sharp. And these are 2 men who are a lot more pragmatic and, conservative in their ways, I suppose, than the Yippie movement guys. And there's David Dellinger, who is more of the adult in the room, a more pragmatic and serious organizer, and he is played by the Zodiac Killer from the movie Zodiac. Additionally, there is also the unofficial 8th member of the defendant's posse, Bobby Seale, the leader of the Black Panther Party, here played by Yahya Abdul-Mateen from Watchmen. And Bobby is sort of essentially thrown into this cast of defendants because he's black, and it's scarier for a racist to see him on trial with these organizers. I want to start this review off by primarily focusing on the good stuff about the movie before I get into my issues with it. So before we get too deep, I do want to at least lead off with the fact that I did enjoy this movie. It's pretty entertaining, it's very well acted. The movie has put together one of the best ensembles I've seen in a movie in quite a while, literally from the big parts to the small parts. Everyone involved is doing very, very good work. And above all else, it is a very watchable experience. Whatever your feelings are about the story, or the execution, or any of those things, this is a movie that is entertaining and enjoyable to watch, full stop. To be honest, the only person in the movie whose work I was a little bit underwhelmed by is actually Yahya Abdul-Mateen's as Bobby Seale, and not necessarily because I think he's a bad actor, or isn't as good as the other actors in the ensemble, but it's just that the Bobby Seale role within this story really should be kind of a breakout scene-stealing performance. Obviously, some of the issues with the performance are Sorkin's fault, it's in the actual writing baked into the script itself, but Yahya makes a lot of odd creative decisions with the character, to me anyway, where I feel like he has a more cartoonish portrayal within the film relative to the ensemble around him, and that's just kind of me nitpicking, but that's how I feel. But everyone else in the cast actually hits their marks very well, especially some of the people who are in more smaller bit roles, Michael Keaton shows up and is fantastic as former Attorney General Ramsey Clark. Frank Langella kind of steals almost every scene in the courtroom as Judge Julius Hoffman, who is such a bad judge that he makes Judge Ito look like Thurgood Marshall. He's just a really, really despicable and frustrating character, but he's also kind of funny. All of the courtroom scenes in the movie have a lot of the same energy as that Rick and Morty short where they were acting from a real life court transcript from whatever backwater state. And this movie kind of brings some of that energy to the table. It's very chaotic, it's very strange, but it's also infuriating. And honestly, if you're a Sorkin fan, if you're the kind of person that likes everything else he's written, you will love this movie. This movie is peak Sorkin. It has all of his tics, all of his little things he does in all of his scripts. It's very, very much in his wheelhouse. And also, the movie has the benefit of having been based on a true story that is largely a courtroom drama, where there are existing courtroom transcripts, so there's only but so much indulgence he can throw into those sequences, because for the most part he really does kind of play it as it actually happened. So that's a huge benefit, and part of the reason why I think the movie as a whole works so well when it is confined to the courtroom, not so much necessarily the flashbacks and scenes surrounding it. And say whatever you will about the man, as I am about to for the rest of this video, it's important to note that it is actually a kind of astonishing feat to pack such a complex story with so many principal characters into a movie that is, as I'll have to say it, efficient as this one is. I mean, the entire story from soup to nuts is 2 hours exactly when the end credits hit. That's pretty incredible for how much there is at stake here, and I gotta give him a little bit of props for that. But all that said, as much as I enjoyed it, as much fun as I had watching it, as much as I would be open to watching again, and as comfortable as I am recommending it to other people, there are 2 principal issues with this movie that are kind of difficult to avoid. One is Aaron Sorkin's very, very banal direction, and the other are his milquetoast politics. Now, it's important to note that in a movie, you can have a movie that is a good, watchable, enjoyable, well-made movie that still has bad politics. And having bad politics does not in and of itself make a movie bad. I am not one of those people that feels the need to conflate what I enjoy with making it some kind of like morally superior argument or whatever, okay? However, these two things are the two biggest forces that stop Trial of Chicago 7 from being a great movie, and they are intertwined, unfortunately. Because in Aaron Sorkin's case, his bad politics directly impact the creative decisions he makes as a uninteresting director. As a screenwriter, Aaron Sorkin is particularly adept at building a bunch of dramatic beats and stacking them on top of each other to build to like a big emotional crescendo. It's something he does very well in his television work, unfortunately. In some ways it can be kind of corny, and in his movies as well. And it's a skill he has that works best in concert with directors who understand what he's going for but can bring their own thing to the table, okay? People like David Fincher and Danny Boyle and TV vet like Thomas Schlamme, like on the West Wing. Like, these are all guys who understand what Aaron Sorkin's trying to do and are able to take his sort of hyperverbal foundation and build something on screen that actually comes alive outside of just the wordiness of it all. But this is Aaron Sorkin's second time directing a movie, and he's just generally not a very good visual stylist. He doesn't actually have an extra dimension to bring to his own writing because he just doesn't have the experience. So as a result, when you watch this movie, every decent moment of actual interesting visual storytelling, you're like, oh, hey, that's a cool way to frame that, or a cool way to get this idea across. There's several other counterweights moving the film in the other direction that just make everything feel like a really weird, bland, like public access television special that happens to have a bigger budget. The best way to explain this is that throughout the movie, Sorkin is constantly, throughout the story, building to depicting the two principal riots in the story. And in both of those cases, the movie builds up to them very well. Like, you're like, the tension and everything is like very palpable. But once he actually gets around to, you know, lensing them for real, he chokes. They become toothless displays of conflict populated by a lot of extras shot on very nice cameras, lit well and all that, but they have no like punchiness, no verve, no real like perspective. The truth of the matter is, this is a movie about revolutionary politics shot and lensed and realized by a total square. Every single incendiary, radicalizing moment within the story that's designed to get you fired up and feel a different way about the world you live in is executed as boringly as possible by a director who, as a person, literally cannot wrap his head around some of these ideas. One of the most important scenes in the story of the Chicago 7, and any adaptation or documentary about this subject, is the part of the trial where Bobby Seale is literally bound and gagged and chained to his seat in open court. It's like this huge, horrible thing that happened in our actual society. And when it comes to that scene in this movie, Sorkin does, again, a fantastic job of building up to it. Like, if you know the story, you know it's coming. And if you don't, you can sense that something is amiss and something is wrong. But once it actually happens, once we actually see this black man chained to a chair with a gag in his mouth and, like, he can barely breathe and stuff, the movie immediately pivots away from that visceral feeling and fictionalizes what happens. Like, it forces you to this moment that is true. In real life, Bobby Seale's trial was severed from the rest of the Chicago 7, and he was granted a mistrial. However, he was bound and gagged in court for days. In the movie, he's bound and gagged in court for like 14 seconds. And him actually getting this severance is not treated as like a triumph for his character who has gone through like this horrible ordeal the entire time. It's for a different character that I'll get into later. The reason his bad politics and his failings as a director are so important to talk about in concert is that they inform one another. His bad vanilla decision-making as a creative storyteller is directly entwined with his bad vanilla opinions and perspectives on existence. He constantly makes safe decisions as a director because he has safe decisions about politics and about the way he sees the world. Aaron Sorkin is in some ways addicted to the centrist viewpoint when it comes to storytelling, and he feels the need to both sides every single decision-making that happens, and it really hurts his stories as a whole. The stories he has told in television and film and theater that are closer to the political realm are always the worst compared to ones that aren't, because he just muddles everything. He shows open contempt for a character like Abbie Hoffman, who was like a real, radical guy, and at the same time softens his edges to make him fit more into the role of a stock Sorkin supporting character.
Hayden says we're going to Chicago to end the war and not to fuck around.
Tell Hayden I went to Brandeis and I can do both.
And the character he appears to sympathize with the most within this story isn't any of the many defendants. Not even like the guys who are on trial for like no reason or barely involved and are essentially treated like the Rosencrantz and Guildenstern of the trial. Like, it's not those guys. It's the prosecutor. Joseph Gordon-Levitt plays the lead prosecutor in this film, And in real life, the guy that was prosecuting this trial was a very typical right-wing reactionary who had no conflicts about doing his job, hated these people, and was happy to see them go to jail for, like, made-up federal laws. Like, this guy was cool with that. But in this movie, Joseph Gordon-Levitt is, like, a nice, honorable, respectable guy who, like, stands for the flag and all this stuff, and it, like, churns him up inside to be a part of the justice system, tearing these guys down. That's, like, bullshit. Like, it's not a real thing, and it makes no sense to make this character be, like, one of the most sympathetic people on screen, given the scope of the story. And the only reason I can think of for Aaron Sorkin to do this, other than the fact that he loves putting in nice guy Republican characters in all of his stories, like these, like, this sort of cool, charming, friendly conservative who, like, fits into things or whatever, is, like, he's trying to avoid getting, like, right-wing criticism for being too sympathetic to leftists, I guess. But if you look at any conservative criticism of this movie, they all think he's too sympathetic regardless. Like, he could open the movie with being like, I fucking hate people who protest and I hope they die, which is, like, generally how I think he feels. And they still would be like, nope, too weak, doesn't hate Antifa enough, you know? And, like, that's who he is as a guy. He's a guy who has to bring every perspective of his to his stories, and his perspective is always that, like, everyone's a little bit good and everyone's a little bit bad, and we should hug. And, like, that's not the world. He handles the Black Panther Party in this story so clumsily, and honestly, not as clumsily as I expected. Like, it's actually a lot more watchable than I thought. I thought I would be, like, you know, wanting to punch my screen, but instead I was like, oh, this isn't so bad. But even then, he's not depicting them favorably because he relates to or understands or has sympathy for Bobby Seale. He uses Bobby Seale and his experiences and his opinions as a cudgel against his white co-defendants. He basically weaponizes identity politics to further criticize the left throughout the movie in a way that's really disingenuous and really disheartening, and I thought was, like, really, really shitty. My real, genuine feel about this movie and about everything as a whole in terms of Sorkin's perspective and storytelling is that his writing the script is, like, fine. The actual script itself is generally better than the one I read from, like, 10 years ago. Like, he clearly variated on these themes and stuff and tinkered with it until it got, like, actually pretty good. And I think him writing the movie is, like, fine, totally fine. But someone else should have directed, someone else with a little bit more variable viewpoint on the world and the people in it, who could have brought something extra, another dimension to the story that would actually give it the sense of complexity that he just does not possess when it comes to telling politically adjacent stories. It's just not his strong suit. I would have loved for someone else to direct the movie so that all the movie's biggest, punchiest, dramatic moments would have a different energy than this.
You do this. He does this. It's a pattern. Read his portion of the Port Huron statement. He implies possessive pronouns and uses vague noun modifiers. You're a talented guy. Except for the possessive pronouns and the vague noun modifiers.
I will say, as much as things in this finished movie are a marked improvement upon the script that I read and reviewed and talked about in my earlier video, the actual ending of the movie somehow managed to be considerably worse, if you'll recall. But then we get to, like, around the 110-page mark, he decides to use an Eminem song. More specifically, he uses the Eminem song Mosh, which many of you will remember is, like, the song from the first really bad Eminem album. I'm not making this up. This really happened. This is a real thing in the script. Now, obviously, the movie doesn't actually use Eminem's Mosh, which would have been terrible, but the music cue for the dramatic climax of the Trial of the Chicago 7 is even more insulting and more saccharine and more hollow, and the entire ending is just, like, such lib fantasy bullshit. Aaron Sorkin, not the guy I want telling stories about revolutionary politics. Those are my feelings on the Trial of the Chicago 7. I hope you guys liked the video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. If you have not subscribed, please consider subscribing. If you have subscribed, hit the little bell icon to get notifications when I put out new videos. I'll have another new video out tomorrow and a couple more next week. Just kind of cranking videos out for the rest of Spooptober. I hope everybody out there staying safe, and yeah, have a great day. Bye.